David, you presented to the team a couple of weeks ago now, what is the problem that we're actually solving? And I thought this episode, we really should be tackling what is proactive health and how are we wanting to solve the problem of people just being so focused on reactive. Alrighty, guys, here we go again. Episode number 4. Welcome back. David, mate, you're remote. Where are you?
I'm in Orlando.
Oh, you're at home. Home in Orlando? You call that home or you call down here Jupiter?
Jupiter is definitely home. I lived in Orlando for many years before moving down, and we kept our house here. And so happened to had a rowing race yesterday, and we've got our climate correction conference coming up in a few days. So my wife and I decided to stay here.
Awesome.
I asked David if he won the race last night. He said nobody knows.
What do you mean by that? What kind of race is that? That sounds like a race you might have lost. That seems like an excuse, because I think if you'd won, you'd know, right?
Well, it's funny in the rowing races, you don't actually know because they handicap you. They put all the age groups together, and you're handicapped by age, and so you don't actually know.
Okay, so it's legit.
All right, guys. Well, listen, I thought we could start today's show by, I want to know what you guys are up to. Because
hey, before we get I have to tell you, last time we ended the show, I said I had a DIY experience I needed to share with a cold plunge as a little bit of a cliffhanger from our last show. So I thought I'd just give you guys, and you may have heard this story, but obviously the audience hasn't. So Dave and lots of other friends have what I would call the Cadillacs or the Ferraris of cold plunges. So when friends started getting into this biohacking therapy, I started looking at the prices, and friends like Dave and others are like, they're $10,000 for a cold plunge. And I have this other friend, and he was like, you don't need to spend $10,000. He's like, you do a DIY, you get a Foot Locker freezer, you get a filtration system, a timer. He's like, I can show you how to build your own cold plunge for under $1,000. So me being somewhat frugal at times, I was like, I'm in. Let's give this a go. So I order a Foot Locker freezer that was, a few $100s, and get all the other things. It's got, again, the filtration, timer, so that, if you just plug it in the wall, it would be a block of ice. So you got to set the timer up so that, it only freezes, and you have to regulate it or modulate it for a while to find the right temperature. So if you want 45 degrees or whatever, you have to kind of play with the timer and go, I want it to go on for 2 hours a day. So things are going swimmingly, pun intended. I'm for like 2 months, I'm using it. And the only thing is that because it doesn't have as good a filtration system as I'm sure the ones that you buy that are made for this purpose, I would have to siphon water out of the tub, on like a monthly basis. Because the water, even though it's got chlorine and all that tablets, it still gets a little bit grungy. So it's probably the 3rd time I'm doing it. And by the way, if you haven't siphoned anything in a while, the physics of that is amazing. Like just to, get liquid going or fluid going out of a hose like that, consistently is a...
You really got to suck pretty hard, don't you?
No, it's actually not.
No? Not just a little suck?
Just a little bit. So the trick is that the hose has to sit flat, on the bottom of the tub, or else you're going to have a lot of remaining water at the end. So, sometimes it worked better than others. So this is like the 3rd time I'm doing it. And so I go to siphon the water. I got a short hose that I cut, specifically for this, and go back inside, after I siphon in it, and come out, and the hose had twisted. And so, there was a couple inches or more of water at the bottom. So I was like, I got to, get the water out of the hose and try to, get it all at the base. So apparently I didn't get all the water out. I thought I did. So I go to, get the fluid going again. There was still water in the line. It hits my lungs so gosh damn hard. I literally couldn't breathe. I'm sitting there in my back room of my garage where I have the cold plunge, and I can't breathe. I'm going, and all of a sudden I realize I can breathe through my nose, right? So I start breathing it out of my nose, and I just thought to myself, how crazy would it be if I just died from doing this? And it'd say like, president of hedge fund dies siphoning water from his DIY cold plunge.
So, man, I'm laughing, but you almost drowned.
It was crazy.
You almost drowned.
I think I waterboarded myself.
Waterboarded yourself in the cesspool at the bottom of your ice bath.
Yeah.
Before this, I hadn't appealed to me much to try siphoning water out of anything, but no.
I'm telling you, it's a physics marvel.
And so, did you go buy yourself a proper ice bath, or did you just?
I'm going to get myself one for my birthday, I think.
Oh, you which is next week, by the way. Happy birthday!
Thank you.
Yeah, no,
appreciate it.
We got an extra one in the club here that doesn't get used, right,
David? I was looking for a good birthday present. Maybe I'll get you one. Probably won't buy a good one for himself, so maybe I'll buy it.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, I didn't realize you were such a tight ass. That's all.
Yeah, I can be at times. I've learned my lesson.
Right. All right. Well, I love that story. That's awesome. But listen, guys, how's your Murph training going? And for people that don't know, Murph is an event done on Memorial Day here in the US to remember. Don't know. Was he a Navy SEAL, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure what his enlisted role was or level, but a fellow that perished in military service. That it's a bit of a memorial workout that is done at I think pretty much all CrossFits and other workout centers for remembering military fallen heroes and just an all around great workout.
Yeah. Well, I haven't done it yet. You guys did it last year, but it's basically you run a mile or 1.6K. You then do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and then finish with another 1 mile run. And you do it for time. You're meant to do it with a 20-pound vest, right?
I mean, not many people do that, but yeah, well, if you're extreme, for sure.
We got to consider it. Even if we get a 2-pound vest or something, we at least got to wear a vest. And
just wear a shirt. Your shirt will get saturated with water and you're good.
But you guys are doing it. How's your training going?
So I haven't specifically trained for it, but I did a Spartan race, again, kind of CrossFit style, a CrossFit oriented gym that I go to. They had a Spartan race, which was taxing and probably a good preparation, but I'll start doing half Murphs probably here in the next 2 months just to get ready for it.
For me, it's all about the pull-ups. If I can get there 100 pull-ups, then no problem with the 200 push-ups and squats because I'm working legs all the time, running, no problem. So to me, it's just a matter of getting to 100 pull-ups.
Dave, can you do the kipping pull-ups? Are you well versed?
I'm trying to learn because that would be more efficient.
Yeah, it's like this swinging.
I don't quite have the form yet. I need some coaching, but supposedly you can save a bit of energy there.
Well. It's tough.
But you guys are going to do it. How are we going to do it? I was thinking, one, I'm going to go for absolute time. So I'm going to try and, cheat the system to some degree. I feel I'm going to put...
The former Olympian here's got all kinds of tricks of the trade.
No. I'm like, I want to put myself right next to the treadmill over here, have the treadmill already set to be running at a certain pace, jump off that and go straight into doing, I figure I'll do 6 pull-ups, 12 push-ups, 18 air squats, do that 6 times through. And I figure if you do all that and then quickly jump on the treadmill again and do one really for time, and then I thought I'd do another day where I basically spend the day seeing if I can do it with the 20-pound vest. And that would be brutal.
See, that's like serious training. That's like Olympian training. I'm just...
No. I've been doing it I'm doing it 3 times a week right now.
But this is all indoors, just to be clear.
I know, but we're also in South Florida. So...
Oh, it's nice this time of the year.
Mate, I don't even think I'll be able to hold it. If we're doing it outdoors, we'll be sweating so much. Are you going to do it outdoors, David? Are you going to do
always do it where you actually run the mile outdoors. Like you,
okay, well, I can run a mile out.
You got this.
I
can run a mile outdoor. I'm all about the transition time.
So to me, it's all about the pull-ups. Like, I hate sharing my Murph secrets with everybody, but typically you do sets of 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 squats, and you kind of repeat.
I did 30, 20, 10.
Right?
30, 20, 10 is my...
You do 10 pull-ups at a time?
10 at a time.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about reducing the amount of transition time, right?
Yeah.
And 5 pull-ups isn't a lot for me, but when you do that many sets, it starts to feel like a lot.
Yeah, so, no. Well, anyway, we're working on that, guys. We got, 2 months? Not even.
Yeah.
I'm trying to... Now, okay, before we move into the show proper, how do you guys feel about doing pull-ups and alternating with chin-ups? So pull-ups, is like this and to that. Are you allowed to alternate? I like to alternate, but I don't want to...
I think you're allowed to do whichever side is
just
comfortable.
Get up there, you don't care?
I've noticed, like, if I was doing a set for max pull-ups, then the chin-ups is easier. I can do more of them. But when you go that long, I start to really feel strain on the tendons. So for me, with that many pull-ups, I'm going to do almost all the forward grip.
We'll get the Murph rule book.
We'll get the Murph rule book. I feel like I'm cheating and cutting corners. Like even when I have to do my air squats, my ability is really terrible.
You got those quarter.
Barry reckons I'm doing quarter squats.
I'm just going to be there and make sure Barry's doing full push-ups and not strongman.
Yeah, I know. Barry's the one we got to watch. You're right, David. Barry's the one we got to watch. Anyway, guys, let's shift gear. Let's get into this show. Today is all about. I read this quote. And I shared it with both of you guys, and it was from. It's actually a good email. It's from Fit Insider, and if you're not subscribing to them, I actually really enjoy it. But there was a quote in there that said, "The ability to measure and assess health before decline occurs will be the greatest revolution of our time." And so, on that, what we're really talking about is proactive health rather than reactive health. And this got me thinking about us as a company at Volo Health, what we're building. And David, you presented to the team a couple of weeks ago now, what is the problem that we're actually solving? And I thought this episode, we really should be tackling what is proactive health and how are we wanting to solve the problem of people just being so focused on reactive. And so first question going out to you, David, and we can all tie into this is really understanding why hasn't healthcare moved from that reactive to proactive now? I know there's a lot of talk out there. I know that that's what we're working on. There's a lot of other companies also focused on proactive health, but curious as to getting your thoughts, guys, on why are we kind of stuck in this reactive phase in health?
Yeah, so people have been talking for decades about we need to move from reactive to proactive. And we keep talking about it. And, there's a zillion apps out there that help you work out more. But the reality is we have no metric of health. You can't really be, the tools don't exist to actually truly be proactive. We say in data science, you can't improve what you can't measure. And so we have no real measure of health. Some people are trying to, some studies show how to lower your blood sugar and some show how to lower your cholesterol, but none really quantify your future health.
And just to be clear, Dave, because, some skeptics might say, well, you can measure weight and you can measure LDL, you can measure, single values. How do those differ, from what you're describing?
Yeah. So when you think about it, weight or BMI is a predictor of your future health, but by itself, it's a weak predictor. LDL is a predictor of your future health, but it's a very weak predictor by itself. So you're sitting and you're looking at all these confusing predictors. What you can do with a model is actually combine it all into a single score. So it's less confusing. You actually know if you're progressing. Because what if you change your lifestyle and some of your markers get worse and some get better? How do you know the net effect of that? So that's why I say health is not truly measured adequately right now. Mm-hmm. People change.
So do you think it's a technology problem, or we got a behavioral problem? Like well, from what you're saying, the data that we got right now, it hasn't been all collected and put into a model, like you're saying, and really working in terms of giving people a really good account of what their health is going to be like in the future if they don't act.
Well, I'd say many have taken the approach of it being a behavioral problem. They say, well, there's apps out there, there's gyms out there. People just aren't motivated. And that's just the nature of people. So people make it a behavioral problem. But when you look at, like taking finance, you've got the FICO score, and you've got an actual score of your future financial health that's based on a machine learning predictive model. That when people have that score to go by, they are proactive about their financial wellness. Not everybody, but we'll say 80%, right? And so, if you don't pay your bill on time, that score goes down. So you've got the immediate metric, the immediate feedback. We don't have that in health. And so in other areas, you can see that where you can measure a future outcome and get immediate feedback, then people will tend to be motivated to be proactive because people need that immediate feedback. I'm going to work, I'm going to work hard in the gym every day so that 30 years from now, I don't get, I may not get a heart attack. It's too far out. And so it's human nature that just doesn't work. There's almost no way to motivate most people in that way.
It's interesting.
Well,
isn't it? Go on.
I think it becomes behavioral, right? If you have the right technology, the goal is it becomes behavioral because, things that Dave just described, whether it's going to the gym or eating healthy, other interventions you can do, if you have this feedback loop that's telling you what you're doing is very positive for your health, you're more likely to continue to do it. But I think beyond that, one of our goals and objectives is to create some gamification of health, right? To make it where it's fun and engaging. Most people, if you bring up a topic of health, they're not necessarily going to be overly enthusiastic about, let's make my health better. But if we can change that concept and not make, a health, journey, not just something for biohackers and, a small percentage of the population, but make something that the majority of the population wants to engage in, that's the recipe for success, which is obviously easier said than done. We've got a lot of work to do along with others to figure out how to make it engaging for people.
Yeah. I think I guess one question I pose to you guys is when I think of why are people still so focused on reactive rather than proactive, there's a couple of things really. I kind of think, one, life is pretty comfortable for most people. And when I say, we'll give you a longer or a better life, it's kind of like, doing pretty good right now. So there's that, but there's also, when somebody has a major cardiac event, for example, suddenly they want to know everything about arterial health, heart failure, and they become experts in that area after they've had that experience. And we're trying to say, hey, don't have that experience. Let's avoid that experience. Let's avoid type 2 diabetes. Let's avoid kidney or liver disease. Let's not actually have those things before you have to become an expert in them. And I feel like that's the problem with reactive health. It becomes such a motivator when you're going through hell. It's painful. It's awful. And now they become the experts. We're trying to say, hey, learn about your body and learn about who you are before it happens. And it's a bit of a hurdle. So I guess the question is, how do you get people to start thinking different? How do you get them to be motivated about this?
I think it's providing the understanding. I mean, you sort of hit the nail on the head, like when it comes to metabolic health, for example, that people are on the spectrum of metabolic health from, the healthiest to unhealthiest, and at the very end of the spectrum is diabetes. And so you got many, many people sort of in the middle climbing that spectrum, moving toward diabetes. But it isn't until the final stages that you start to get the symptoms. You hit that A1C of 5.7, you're pre-diabetic, and then you're diabetic. There's all these things that are measurable that happen before that. So if you see that it's a spectrum, and you start to see yourself, it's much easier to be proactive and improve your metabolism before you're already there at the end and have diabetes. But even if you have diabetes, it is very possible to improve and move in the right direction on that spectrum with the right habits.
So if we're saying there's a problem, that we need to move people towards proactive health, I guess the bigger question becomes then, what makes what we're building at Volo Health the right solution? And what makes what we're building really stand out? If we dive into the weeds a little bit, David, and what we're building here with you leading the charge and your team around you in terms of the models that we're building, what makes what we're doing the solution going forward?
Well, I guess there's a lot of, first of all, if you're going to have a model of future health, it has to be a robust and accurate model. It's got to have characteristics. So we do, again, it's not the first model of health. We use, like I said, we use the marker LDL cholesterol as a marker of cardiac health. In reality, it's not at all accurate. You could have a much more accurate model. So we need to, so if you combine all the predictors, you have a cardiac health score, and you know that cardiac health score is precisely linked to probability of a future cardiac event. Then you have the precision. You have the model that allows you to be proactive. So there are some other models out there, but they're heuristics and differences. Heuristic is not driven by data; it's driven by some.
Actually, what's heuristic?
Heuristic, it's like sort of think of like a rule-based system. Some doctor who's behind the scenes decides, okay, well, based on my understanding, LDL is bad, maybe high albumin is bad, high A1C is bad, and they sort of try to construct this formula. It's a combination of different markers, and we see that. But when you look at the scores, you can easily tell that it doesn't work. It doesn't correlate to actual true outcomes when you follow the data. When you look at big populations, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people followed for 15 years, those heuristical formulas, they don't actually correlate to outcome. Whereas this is a machine learning algorithm applied to where if the algorithm says, okay, 20% of this group of people will get, you have a 20% chance of getting a cardiac event in 15 years, it's based on actual data where people of your profile followed for 15 years, exactly 20% did get a cardiac event. So it's based on actual data, actual outcomes. There's no human opinion that one marker is better than the other.
And that's what everything's based on right now. It's all like doctor's opinion, a doctor-derived heuristic approach. And this is the first time anybody's actually looking at.
Dave, is that true of like the Framingham score and ASCVD models?
No, there are some scores out there, and it's more known in academic circles. So the Framingham score, for example, there's a prevent calculator out there. Those are machine learned models too. They're just not as well known. They're not as accurate as ours. And there's some flaws from a precision standpoint because they're linear models. Generally, we do have to look at nonlinear relationships between these markers and diseases, between diseases and age. For example, dementia versus age, it's not a linear pattern. Dementia, it's sort of exponential. You have almost zero chance of getting dementia until 60, 70. And it just starts, it becomes exponential. So the methods used for those machine learning models are linear. Same with, there's a formula called pheno-age out there, a linear model. So there are a few machine learning based models out there. They're still better than the heuristic, but they're still lacking a lot that our models can provide from.
Dave, what would you say is in our roadmap for comparison? Because I think for the academics and sophisticated folks that perhaps are using those types of models today, would you say it's fair that we're going to do a side-by-side comparison to provide some validation or insights into our prediction accuracy relative to those?
Right. So for example, the prevent calculator, it's not known much to the public, but it is a predictive model that I think it's maybe one of the top academic models right now. Our model for cardiac event is actually 6 times more accurate when you actually look at the outcomes. That's on an age-adjusted basis. So a lot of these models, they factor in age, and age is a big predictor. But you want to be able to see, to get value out of the model, you want to know, okay, what other than my age is actually predicting my probability to go up.
You guys, it may be too deep to get in the weeds, and how are you making that assessment? Is it, testing on some out-of-sample data or both models and saying, okay, neither models have seen these patients or these individuals and these outcomes. Let's, score those against our models and see which one is more accurate.
Exactly. You score it on an actual population where you have their results, like you have their diagnosis and follow-up for 15 years. And you say, okay, if you ran our model at time 0 and prevent model time 0, and you look 15 years later, like how many people did each correctly predict to get a cardiac event.
So 6x is pretty, obviously a great improvement. The other thing that I think I'm safe in saying, although, Dave, you might have a company or a model that you've come across and we're asking, members of the marketplace and clinicians and scientists to bring us any models that have more of a multidimensional view. The ones that we've talked about generally have a unidimensional, be it cardiac health, whereas ours is multidimensional. So you can see not just the heart health aspect that Dave mentioned, but lung. You can see liver, kidney, brain, metabolic health we talked about. So to see the cross section of these things, or the multidimensional, in my hope and view, is a game changing element, because don't just look at one component of your health. Look at the whole multidimensional aspect to really understand. Yeah, maybe I'm improving in this area, but am I subsequently or simultaneously even negatively impacting another area? To have that awareness is
right. We focus on 7 different outcomes. Cardiac event is just one of them, but we're looking at type 2 diabetes. We're looking at kidney disease, liver disease. It turns out, actually, and it's important, and we need to educate people on this. People are looking so much at just cardiac disease or cardiac events. Cardiac event, the data shows, is actually downstream of a lot of issues, such as kidney health. So why do we predict kidney disease when only a few % of people actually die from kidney disease? Well, turns out that the model kidney health, as a result of that, is way more predictive of mortality than the cardiac model. So actually, if you want to live long and healthy, it's showing the data's pointing to the keeping your kidneys healthy, and downstream of unhealthy kidneys is all the other outcomes eventually related to cardiac events and this and that. But these are things that need education, and that education will be based completely on, again, our data findings, is because we had a bunch of nephrologists say the kidneys are most important. It's just what the data led us that this is something that you could be proactive in a way that's perhaps even more actionable or more meaningful for your quality of life than focusing only on cardiac health.
I remember when you were first showing me that, I've had Laura, my wife, it's about your kidneys, for years. And I don't know where she's got her information from, but then when we actually are proving it in the models that we have, and you and I sat down, David, we were in, and like, look at this cystatin C score. And this is, if you look at the kidney issues and then it becoming a heart issue, it became so clear. Like, I feel like I've heard these murmurs, and now we're actually validating it through correct data science. And that's what's really exciting about what we're doing here. But I guess, why has nobody else done this? Like, how come we're here at the frontier of this? Is there anybody else we've talked about the individual, but why has nobody else looked at the data like we're doing?
Well, I think because the conventional way of going about this is not a data science angle. It's very considered a medical problem. So there's a lot of doctors trying to solve this, but really to solve this, it's a complex problem. You need a large, experienced data science team. You need to be able to account for biases in the data. You need reliable data flows. Again, we've got physicists who are doing data engineering, right? Because you need data flows. Generally, in a university setting, you don't have this multidisciplinary setup, right? There might be, you just have a data set and someone doing some data science on it. Whereas you really need to do this correctly, you need the whole system of data flows. And we need to stop doing linear models. Traditionally, most scientists are trained for various areas on how to do linear models. These are nonlinear problems. And we need large data sets to nail down the combinations of predictors, which is what we're obtaining. So I do think it's the size and breadth of the data science team you need. It's preventative because you got a lot of small companies starting up, maybe limited budget, and they cut corners on the data science, and then maybe they have a data scientist or two versus this whole team, which we have from the whole finance area. We've seen that you need to actually do very, very high quality data science. And if you don't have the highest quality data science, people are going to see problems in the models. It's not going to be believable. You won't be able to measure yourself kind of from one month to the next and see improvements in the model unless it's very accurate and precise and you got the right data flowing in.
So building on that, you mentioned having the data science team from the Volo investment management team. Is there much of a difference between, do you need different data scientists, or is it just, if you're great at data science, you can work in the investment management side and you can cross over to health? Or how are you building your team for health? Is it, I'm interested in the correlation and the differences, I guess.
So it's very, very similar, actually. Even though one's financial data and one's health data. When you look at the outcomes you're predicting, one's predicting stock moves and one's predicting events, like cardiac events, for example. But these are sparse events. There's all kinds of biases in the data. For example, you might have like you can have, it's called like batch effects, for example, in biology, where you find something pattern that's statistically significant, but it's just because you maybe had diabetics in the group, or or it may look like, again, I think this may be why people think LDL is such a predictor of cardiac event, because older people, as you get older, your LDL goes up. So the age is causing a effect. It's not really the higher LDL. But when you look within a narrow age group, you'll see that it's not predictive. But the same thing happened in finance, right? We're looking at different sectors moving, and so it looks like there's a pattern, but there's not. So we know we've 15 or 16 years of developing that data science team. We've gotten better and better and more consistent there. And we're known in the industry for data science there. And it's really just applying those same skills to healthcare data.
Amazing. I'm actually curious as to, you've kind of touched on a little bit of, what data really matters. And I've sat in on a few of the biomarker research meetings with you and a number of the other data scientists. And I must admit, I'm always playing a bit of catch up. I'm the layman in the group that's just always trying to keep up with the language that you use. And I remember once you were one of the data scientists on your team said, I removed, people that might have died in the 15 years, in terms of building our model. And you said, I kept it. And I was curious as to see, when you're looking, to build this team, you don't want everybody to always be agreeing, right? You've got to be trying all the different data points and trying to assess what truly does matter. Go into that a little bit for me, because it's like understanding what data truly matters and what data doesn't as you're building these models over time. Is it a time thing and just having different personalities look at different problems? How are you building that team to identify your weaknesses so somebody can be always testing it?
Well, there's a sort of 1,000 different skills needed in data mining. And so I'm always looking for people on the team that, maybe with skills that people are better than me in some area of that. So like maybe people that are data flows. I'm not a database developer. And so there's a subtle way people look at patterns. Like some people run more models. I do a little bit more examination of the data, predictor by predictor, to understand them really well. And then I do actually very few models. I really understand the data when I finally do a model. So I think this blend of different styles and different ways of thinking really helps. And then, of course, there's the techniques themselves, right? When it comes to nonlinear techniques in data science, there's everything from gradient boosting to random forest to neural networks. So you've got all these, and then people have their expertise, they have their algorithms that they've used more than others. And when you're comparing one algorithm to the other, you kind of want the person who's best at that algorithm to be running that test. And there's people specifically good. There's data science specifically good at just finding bad data points or peculiarities in the data. Like the data scientist who's looking a lot at seasonality, like your vitamin D. If vitamin D goes into your formula, you should know that, again, that if you're living in a cold area, your vitamin D fluctuates up and down about 10 points, and you can see that in the data. So that needs to be, I think that's a major factor for your long-term health. You need to sort of adjust for seasonality. So there's subtle things like that, but it all comes back to, again, that's an example where if I were in a box doing this model all by myself without a team, then there's no way I could catch all those little things. There'd be flaws.
I got a question for you then, Barry. These models are getting built. We trust them. We've spent years looking at them. We're ingrained in them. They're giving us better and better data and more accuracy. It's incredible what we're finding. But what we're up against is getting people to trust and adopt our findings. So what's the strategy going forward in terms of, okay, we have this information, we have these ideas of an education plan we want to share with the world and get this information out there. But Barry, this one's to you. Mm-hmm. How do you get society as a whole to start going, hey, you got to trust and adopt our findings?
Yeah, it's a key question, right?
Easy question.
Yeah, I got an easy answer. No, I mean, just to kind of restate the problem, if you can do the best data science in the world, but if you are unable to convince people that there's a lot of value and benefits to that data science, then it's to some degree all for naught. So that is a critically important element for us. And unlike on the investment side, investors just care about returns, right? So they are certainly inquisitive and curious as to how you generate returns, but as long as you continue to generate healthy returns, they're relatively happy. On the health side, by contrast, people will want to understand and not comfortable with the black box approach or understanding of how you're deriving your scores and your predictions. So it is, I'm just basically restating the problem at this point. That I think the roadmap for us is to understand how do we validate these things? How do we do, we talked a moment or two ago about the either head-to-head comparisons or showing people through validation, that our predictions have accuracy. And like anything, we're going to have some early adopters and people that understand it either because they're comfortable with data science, or they're willing to take a little bit of a leap of faith if they're not. And ultimately over time, people are going to see the impact of our models and understand, how causation and ultimately interventions that they're doing or lifestyle changes that they're doing, they'll see them in their scores. Most of those or many of them will make sense, right? If I stop exercising and start eating unhealthy, I'm probably going to see my scores deteriorate quite a bit. I'll understand there's validity in that. But it's no small hill to climb. We have a lot of things to figure out in terms of how do we get out there, educate people, bring them along for the ride, and make this fun and as enjoyable as possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when we look at health scores, it really comes down to every person's going to look at it and go, well, how is that going to affect my life on a daily basis, right? It's like you can give me my health score and I'll sit there and go, okay, how's it really impacting me? And I know we've talked a lot about short-term health scores, but, emerging those to be correlate to long-term health scores. But I think it's like you said, there's an an adoption from the early adopters. It'll come around. But getting to the point, that we're as widely accepted as in health as FICO is in finance is obviously our big anchoring goal as a company. And I'm putting it out there into the universe. But it really is. And I think, that's what drives us going forward in everything we do, is to have enormous impact around the world so people can take more ownership of their health and be more proactive. And some people are going to be motivated by fear. Other people are going to be motivated by just wanting to feel better. And so there's a cross-section of different types of people.
David, what do you think? Patience with the whole adoption thing too.
Yeah.
Anytime there's a system ingrained in people, it's very hard to switch over. And we saw in finance, for example, we developed this great system and we're enjoying, great returns, but institutions were kind of like machine learning and finance, and you're kind of breaking the rules. And so, even 3 years in of great returns, people were still skeptical and then all of a sudden, 5 years was this inflection point where people are like, people dip their toe in and invest, and before we knew it, we were at capacity. Like we couldn't take any more investors. And I think the same is true with health. Like we're just right now, we know it's going to take at least 5 years. We're creating the educational resources. We think, we're going to enjoy the health benefits ourselves. We see even in our small cohort, people feel better. Like they know the scores are accurate. They improve their scores. And you hear, gosh, I feel better. I'm rowing faster. I'm biking faster. Like they feel younger. And it's going to be that little group for a while, but we put the resources out there, free to use. You can go in, you can not only get your scores, but you can sort of slide the dials and say, gosh, if I move my weight down 10 pounds, how does that impact the scores? And you see them change. So it's very interactive. But I'm trying to find ways to represent a lot of complicated data, but in a very simple way. That's an evolution. We're getting better at it. And so, but right now people can just try it out and see, but I'm not fooling myself, to thinking that by next year, everybody's going to be on the system. No, this is going to take some patience and time, but I think we're all internally, we're patient because we're motivated by our own improvement. We're all improving our health as we do this, and we just try to, spread the word and welcome people into our system.
Point. That is a good point. And Barry, you and I are two of the most patient people I know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, no, but I love that you said, we're building it almost for ourselves to some degree, and we're all using it, and we're all actually able to see things change. We're doing our blood work. We're working in the performance lab. We're trying to see what things are impacting our scores more than others. Have you guys seen, Barry, certain things more than others impact your scores, both good and bad? Have you seen your scores go down for certain things? Have you seen them go up?
Yeah, I was going to mention that, to me, the engagement is part of the journey or the experience is just to try things and to have observability. Like, for me, I think I mentioned maybe in our first or second episode that, a hook for me was that I thought, I was already doing all the right things. I was, exercising on a routine basis. I was eating, healthy, but I really did not have a good understanding of my blood chemistry, and I didn't have any kind of roadmap or measurement to say, okay, if I do something different, let's say I eat more carbs, less carbs, do more cardio, less cardio, how does that impact my numbers? And so now we have the ability to do that. And it's not just, I'm going to do something and it's always going to be better. There's going to be times when, and there's noise in the data as well, as we all know, is always going to be the case. Like, for example, my last blood test, had some derogatory scores or declining scores, particularly with kidney. And I have a kidney on my left side from a kidney operation when I was a kid that was only partially functional. So there's nuances that, we all have to think through. And, even this morning I was talking to one of our colleagues, and we were talking about guidelines that we'll provide to people for blood test taking. And even as the disciplined folks that are creating the guidelines, I thought to myself, geez, I probably worked out the night before I had my blood test.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to avoid that, to ensure that, I'm getting the best reading possible. But it's a discovery, right? I think the short story is this is going to be a discovery process for all of us. We talk about the N of one, or the concept of an N of one platform, where we can each get on this platform and do that self-discovery and learn a tremendous amount of things that, will allow us to improve our health.
Mm-hmm. Didn't you come back from Colorado and your scores were a little...
Yeah, that was the other thing. My house in Colorado is at 10,000 feet. So I was at, say extremely high, but say really high altitude for, most of the month of December. So, all of these factors and again, getting more engaged and more in, taking more personal agency in your health, you start to think about all these different components. And now I said, well, I'll get another blood test done, even though, I may not do it but once every 6 months, because I had this test and I had some things like you just mentioned, whether it's altitude, working out too recent before my test. I'm going to do it again and see, do I get any different readings, or are they fairly similar?
Yeah, I love that, because it's like you just touched on there, N equals 1, you versus you. And I think what we can be doing here is really allowing every individual to take just more ownership of their health, but doing it in a fun, curious way, right? Like to be honest, I was always about performance. I was never about health. And everybody thinks because you're a professional athlete, you were healthy. I was like, there was nothing. I was so inflamed and, had that exercise-induced hematuria. I think I'm getting that right. Basically in short pissing blood. But, in the 90s, you wore that like a badge of honor. Well, if I'm doing that, it must be so tough and strong. And yet really what I'm doing is I'm beating up my kidneys and it wasn't a healthy approach. And even just working with you guys and building this, and we all just keep leaning into it more. There's something about just learning more about the thing that you get to keep for the rest of your life, right? Which is your body. Yeah. It's like, we'll all spend so much money in our cars and our homes and blah, 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 and we're all trying to make them better, and we'll invest in those and we'll invest in those. For some reason, the one thing that we actually keep forever is kind of sidelined half the time, and we couldn't be bothered. We'll deal with it when it happens. We'll, this whole reactive approach, and even I enjoy having conversations with a lot of people in and around Volage that aren't focused on health. And so they're all curious as to what health is about, but they're not really into it. And it's kind of having these conversations going, no, we're building the tool so you can just learn a little bit more about it. You can lean in to learn about who you are and what your body's actually doing. And if there is a little bit of a red flag or a pink flag, if you actually look at our scores, you can actually go, hang on, maybe if I exercise a little bit better, go to bed on time, focus on some sleep and work on my nutrition a little bit, I can actually reduce those now. In the short term, it'll have an enormous impact going, long term. So I guess the question I pose to you guys is, how do we actually get people to be like I have over this last 6 to 9 months, start leaning in more into what this health score is showing people and getting them excited? Again, above the shoulders, it's almost behavioral psychology, but it's like, how do you get people to actually be excited about wanting to do this? It's a big challenge, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think, David?
It's a multi-pronged approach, right? We're trying many different things at the same time to see what will, and maybe different people get interested by different aspects. So we have the Volo app, which will be coming out, where people are motivated by, again, we got point system for different forms of exercise, and that might motivate people and they can see their health scores improve that way. And maybe that just going online and seeing, plugging in your blood work into our simulator and seeing scores, that will get people engaged. And again, we'll know by the usage stats that works. And then there's the biomarker reference guide, which we put out there, where it's like, where you're just trying to interpret your blood work, and you just want to know, okay, what does this mean? What does it mean to be on the high end of the range for white blood cell count, right, or the low end of the range, versus just sort of like that's typical test telling you, okay, your cholesterol's out of range. Well, what does that mean? How much out of range? What does the biomarker reference guide tells you for every marker? You look up any marker, it tells you where the different ranges are as a predictor of 7 different diseases, and you sort of see it all in one page, and you get the picture right there. HDL, people don't realize how the good cholesterol. People don't realize how strong a predictor that is for many diseases, where you want to be as high as possible, especially for it's a huge predictor of type 2 diabetes if your value is too low. So I think everybody's going to find their own useful niche in there, and it depends. Again, depending on your issues, some people are, they might have cardiac events in the family, so they're looking at the cardiac scores number one. Other people are struggling with diabetes in the family and overweight, so they're looking at they're going to be focused on the metabolic markers. And then you get people, maybe you have genetics for dementia, so you're going to want to look at that score and say, and that's something where you maybe in your 40s or 50s, you have many years to figure out what will improve that score, but at least you have some kind of metric of whether you're moving there again. So I think that the question of adoption, it's just, we want to sort of have that niche for everybody and have multiple areas where someone can get engaged, and then we just sort of see what pulls people in the most.
Amazing.
I think it bears mentioning too that we're going to have consumer-facing products, like Dave mentioned, for trying to engage and provide people with this opportunity and tool set. But the market's a dynamic, complex place, right? So we're not foolish enough to think that we're going to be able to single-handedly do this, right? We're gonna find a lot of companies that want to embed our data science analytics into what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're happy to do that. In fact, we're more than happy to do that, right? We realize that it's going to take, an entire community of people like us that are trying to bring, this type of change and evolution to the marketplace.
Mm. And David, you've actually seen, you've worked with quite a few people now over the past year. You've actually had some amazing testimonials from them, and you've seen people actually just take that change. And I know you've had some emails and you've had feedback from people. I remember being at the Volo Foundation dinner, and one of the speakers there said, "You have no idea how much you've impacted my life just by making me clue into what I've had going on, and I've been able to take some actions and actually see these improvements." And I think there's a real joy in that for us on this side. That's one of the things I think that, the three of us are sitting here going, yeah, we're all getting healthier and we feel stronger. But I think, our motivation comes from having that impact where we get these testimonials that have actually taken a little bit more ownership of their lives. They're actually seeing their health scores improve. They're feeling better. That is the thing that drives us. Obviously, we want to build a company. We want to educate the world on these health scores. But even if we can impact a dozen people that actually take more ownership of their life and become healthier, I think we're in a really good place. I think that's a really cool feeling.
I agree, and that's what drives me. Hearing those testimonials, so rewarding, and I always wanted to be able to use data science skill for more than predicting stocks, like doing something that would actually help people. And really, the company is just an excuse to be able to help people in this way. But it's it is really rewarding to see, even early on with our small number of users, people seeing some big benefits.
If you ask Simon Sinek or whatever, if your why is in the right place, that's the way to build a company. And I truly think when we think about our why and why we're doing this, and we want to be the company known for, proactive health and people taking more ownership of their bodies and becoming healthier and living longer. And even like I said at the All Hands last week, it's not even about you as an individual, but potentially, if you're a father, if you're a mother or whatever, and it's for your family, it's not to be a burden on them later in life, whatever it takes, right? Whatever it takes to motivate you to make those differences. Before we wrap up here, anything you guys want to mention before we go? This has been a great episode just to dive into sort of what the problem we face in the world. I'm really curious as to if we were to say to a listener right now, what sort of one key takeaway that they should be from this episode that you think, they should maybe leave with? Is there anything that stands out for you guys?
Dave, you want to go first?
Put you on the spot.
I've got one.
For the listeners out there, just try out our tools and provide feedback if there's ways that we can represent the data to be more educational. Really, it's going to be through iteration and just trying it out that will move toward adoption.
Yeah, and just to give the shameless plug, VoloHealth.com is where users can find that link to our simulator and the reference guide that Dave mentioned. And the thing that I would suggest, and this is going to sound very simple, but it is try different things. I just had something that my wife, she's had some kidney challenges or issues in the last year or so, and her physician told her, he said, eat or drink lemon water every day religiously. And so I started doing that about a month ago, and she laughs at me because she's like, "You're way more disciplined about this than I am." So just try, one or two things that are new things for you and ideally, if you have some observation points, either our platform or other measures, to understand how it's affecting you. You don't have to make this colossal shift in your health all at one time, right? Just, do little things that are manageable and practical that you can pull off, kind of like that book, Tiny Habits. Don't try to do 1,000 push-ups a day. Do 5 push-ups when you brush your teeth, and you're more likely to actually continue doing it.
You can do that. You brush your teeth and do push-ups. Oh my God. What? Is that a one-handed push-up?
I'll show you upstairs.
Any guy can do that.
That is brilliant. I love it, guys. Well, this has been really fantastic. Next episode, I think we talked about, we might even show some of the, as we're building the Volo Club here, we already have an amazing performance lab here where we have everything from body comp and the Dari motion capture machine we have here, lactate and all sorts of things. And David, you don't know this, we were talking pre-show, we're going to put you on the lactate and we're going to be watching you do a workout next time we record this episode to see, we might even do a VO2 max test just for our...
Lactate, the math, I'm ready.
I'm not doing that. I'm really...
He said he's in for the Dari. He wants to show us his mobility.
Oh my gosh, my ability. Just ask Laura. Something falls on the ground. I'm like, I got to pick it up. I know we all have things to work on. To your point, we all got lots of little things to work on. But look, if anything comes from this episode, the one thing that I would say is the more that you realize that, like I said earlier, this is your body that you get to have for the rest of your life. Just take a bit more ownership. I'm not saying, to your point, just lean in a little bit, learn a little bit more what's going on. Our app will be out in this next 6 months, 3 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Putting the pressure on the product team here. 6 months. And it's going to be wonderful. But until then, we do have the simulator. Go to VoloHealth.com, try out the simulator, look at the biomarker reference guide. It'll educate you on everything, because I don't know about most listeners. I get this blood work back. I don't even know what half of it means. So that reference guide is a really handy tool as well. Use the simulator and give it a go. But those are great, guys. That's a wrap. Cheers.
Great. Thanks.